My wife didn't just cheat on me. She invited me to dinner with her lover to mock me to my face. She called me boring and safe while holding his hand under the table. She thought she was discarding a weak husband. She didn't realize she was activating a military-grade sleeper agent. I didn't flip the table. I didn't scream. I paid the bill, went home, and treated our marriage like a compromised server. For 30 days, I tracked every lie, every stolen dollar, and every secret text. I built a dossier that didn't just end our marriage, it triggered a federal investigation into her lover. You think you know revenge? Watch how I dismantled their lives without ever raising my voice. This is how you win a war without firing a shot. The restaurant was one of those downtown establishments designed to make you feel underdressed, regardless of the price of your suit. It was all low amber lighting, heavy velvet drapes, and the hushed, expensive clatter of silver against porcelain. The air smelled of aged steak, truffle oil, and old money. It was the kind of environment my wife, Sarah, had recently begun to crave, a sharp deviation from the quiet, intimate dinners we used to share at home. I sat across from them, feeling less like a husband and more like a third-party observer brought in for a compliance audit. Next to Sarah sat Ryan Hale. He was her new senior project lead, a title that seemed to involve more late-night strategy sessions than actual deliverables. Ryan was a man constructed entirely of confidence and aggressive cologne. He did not sit in his chair. He occupied it, sprawling his limbs with the casual entitlement of someone who assumes the world will adjust to his dimensions. He was wearing a bespoke jacket that cost more than my first car, and his smile was a fixed weapon, bright, disarming, and entirely predatory. "Kevin, you have to try the Cabernet," Ryan said, signaling the waiter without even looking at him. "Sarah tells me you are more of a beer guy, but you need to expand your palate. Live a little." He poured the wine into my glass before I could answer. It was a dominance display, subtle but unmistakable. He was rewriting my preferences in front of my wife, and she was letting him do it. I looked at Sarah. I expected to see a flinch, a moment of discomfort at his presumption. Instead, I saw a glowing admiration that turned my stomach to ice. She was looking at him the way a startup founder looks at a venture capitalist, desperate for approval, desperate to be seen as high value. "Kevin is very traditional," Sarah said, her voice light, airy, almost unrecognizable. She swirled her wine, avoiding my eyes. "He likes his routines, safe, predictable. If it were up to him, we would have put that bonus into a 401k instead of this trip to Cabo." Ryan laughed, a deep, resonant sound that drew the attention of the nearby tables. "Safety is an illusion, Sarah. In my world, if you are not leveraging risk, you are depreciating. You are just taking up space." I felt the muscle in my jaw tighten. The conversation had shifted vectors. This was no longer small talk. It was a targeted dismantling of my character. I was being framed as the legacy software, outdated, slow, incompatible with the new operating system Sarah was trying to install. "I believe in risk management," I said, my voice steady, cutting through their laughter. "There is a difference between calculated risk and reckless exposure." Ryan smirked, leaning forward, invading the center of the table. "Spoken like a true analyst. No offense, Kev, but that is the problem with your sector. You guys are so focused on the firewall that you forget to look at the view. Sarah has so much potential. She needs someone who pushes her to break the rules, not follow them." He said she needs someone. Not she needs a boss, or she needs a mentor. He was openly positioning himself as the solution to the problem that was me. I watched Sarah. This was the critical moment, the point of failure or redundancy. A loyal partner would have stepped in. A loyal partner would have established a boundary. "Ryan is right, Kevin," she said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were hard, lacking any trace of the warmth I had known for 7 years. "You are always so worried about what could go wrong. It is exhausting. Sometimes I feel like I am married to a safety manual, not a man." The table went silent. The insult hung in the air, radioactive. It was not playful teasing. It was a tactical strike. She had just devalued me in front of a competitor. She had signaled to Ryan that I was compromised, that my defenses were down, and that she was open for acquisition. I looked at Ryan. He was watching me with the look of a predator who knows the prey has a broken leg. He expected me to snap. He wanted me to get angry, to raise my voice, to make a scene that would validate their narrative. If I exploded, I became the unstable, jealous husband. I became the liability. In that second, something inside me fractured, but it did not break. It rebooted. For 10 years, I had worked in high-stakes environments, military intelligence signals, corporate cybersecurity, threat assessment. I knew how to handle a breach. When a system is compromised, you do not panic. You do not smash the keyboard. You isolate the infected nodes. You monitor the traffic. You lock down the core assets. I felt the husband part of me, the man who loved her, the man who wanted to build a family, the man who was hurt die in that chair. He was deleted, wiped from the drive. In his place, the operator came online. The pain that had been searing my chest moments ago cooled instantly, hardening into a block of absolute freezing clarity. I was no longer at a dinner with my wife and her colleague. I was in a hostile environment with two threat actors. I picked up the wine glass Ryan had filled. I held it up to the light, inspecting the color, my hand perfectly steady. "You make an interesting point, Ryan," I said. My voice was devoid of emotion, stripped of any frequency that could be interpreted as anger. Risk is indeed necessary, but usually, when people ignore the safety manual, they end up becoming a cautionary tale in the incident report. I took a sip, set the glass down, and looked directly at Sarah. I did not look at her with love, or betrayal, or sadness. I looked at her with the neutral, analytical gaze of a coroner examining a cold body. "And you are right, Sarah," I continued. "I have been too passive. I have been focused on the wrong metrics. Thank you for the wake-up call." They exchanged a glance, confusion flickering behind the arrogance. They had expected resistance. They had expected an emotional outburst they could mock later in the privacy of their text messages. Instead, I gave them complete, terrifying compliance. I sat through the rest of the dinner in silence, eating my steak with precision. I watched them interact. I cataloged every touch of their hands, every shared look, every micro-expression of intimacy that did not belong to colleagues. I was no longer participating in the marriage. I was gathering intelligence. When the bill came, Ryan made a show of reaching for it, but I intercepted the folder. "I have got it," I said, placing my card down. "Treat this as an investment." "In what?" Ryan asked, struggling to regain his footing. "In clarity," I replied. As we walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air, Sarah walked ahead with Ryan, laughing at something he whispered. She did not look back to see if I was following. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully humiliated me, put me in my box, and elevated her lover. She had no idea that she had just authorized her own destruction. She had invited the wolf into the house, but she forgot that the man holding the keys was the one who hunted wolves for a living. I unlocked the car, my pulse resting at a calm 60 beats per minute. The operation had begun. The drive home from the restaurant was suffocatingly silent. Sarah scrolled through her telephone, the blue light illuminating a small, secretive smile that vanished the moment I glanced over. She did not ask if I was angry. She did not apologize for the ambush. In her mind, the dinner had been a successful calibration exercise. She had reset the baseline of our marriage to a new low, and I had accepted it without a fight. She believed I was defeated. She did not understand that I had simply gone dark. We entered the house, a colonial in the suburbs that we had purchased 3 years ago, a structure that represented stability and shared equity. Now, as I walked through the foyer, it felt different. It felt like a compromised facility. I looked at the family photographs on the hallway table, and they no longer looked like memories. They looked like propaganda from a regime that had already fallen. Sarah went upstairs to prepare for bed. "I am exhausted," she called out, her voice feigned and light. "Do not stay up too late, Kevin. You know how you get when you do not sleep." "I have some administrative work to finish," I replied. My voice was flat, calibrated to a frequency of total indifference. I waited until I heard the shower running. Then, I entered my home office and locked the door. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The fan whirred to life, the only sound in the room. I did not open my work email. I did not open a game or a streaming service. I opened a blank spreadsheet. In cybersecurity, the first step of incident response is not to attack. It is to identify. You have to establish the scope of the breach. You have to understand the pattern of life, the standard baseline of behavior, so you can identify the anomalies. For the last 6 months, I had been ignoring the red flags, dismissing them as the noise of a busy life. Tonight, I began the audit. I started with the timeline reconstruction. I treated the last 90 days of our marriage as a data set. I pulled up the joint credit card statements, the cell phone carrier logs, and the shared calendar. I placed them side by side on my dual monitors. I began to cross-reference timestamps. Anomaly 1. The work emergencies. Sarah had claimed to be working late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 weeks on the Harrison project. I cross-referenced this with her expense reports on the joint card. On 3 of those Tuesdays, there were charges for 2 coffees at a cafe in the West End, 4 miles in the opposite direction of her office. The timestamps were 8:15 p.m. Why would someone working late at the corporate headquarters drive 20 minutes away for coffee, only to drive back? It was inefficient. It was illogical. Unless the destination was not the coffee shop, but the apartment complex directly across the street from it. Anomaly 2. The digital iron curtain. I looked at the data usage logs. Historically, Sarah's data consumption peaked during her commute and her lunch break. In the last 2 months, the pattern had inverted. Her usage spiked late at night, often between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., hours when she was supposedly sleeping next to me. I realized she was using encrypted messaging applications, Signal or WhatsApp, to bypass the SMS logs on our carrier bill. She had moved her communications to a secure channel. This was not accidental, it was operational security. I felt a cold phantom pain in my chest, a dull ache where my heart used to be. But I forced the operator to override the husband. Focus on the data, I told myself. The data does not lie. The data does not love you. The data just is. Then, I found the artifact. It was a simple oversight, a failure in her cleanup protocol. We shared a rideshare account, a legacy setting from when we only had 1 car. She had recently switched the notifications to go to her private email, but she had forgotten to revoke the family sharing visibility on the desktop browser version. I filtered the history by last 30 days. There it was, a receipt from last Friday. On Friday, Sarah had told me she was at a team-building happy hour at a bar downtown. She said she had taken a cab home because she had been drinking. The narrative was plausible. It fit the social expectations of her industry. But the digital footprint told a different story. The ride request originated at 5:45 p.m. from her office. The destination was not the downtown bar. It was a residential address in the upscale district of Highland Park. I copied the address into a satellite mapping tool. I switched to the street view. It was a modern, glass-fronted condominium building. I zoomed in on the call box visible in the high-resolution image. The resolution was grainy, but I could make out the names listed for the penthouse units. R. Hale. Ryan Hale. She had gone directly to his home. The ride lasted 4 hours. The return trip originated from the same address at 10:30 p.m., terminating at our house. She had lied about the location. She had lied about the company. She had lied about the timeline. I stared at the screen. The white light burned into my retinas. The proof was right there, a digital breadcrumb that shattered the entire illusion of my life. She had not just cheated. She had constructed a false reality. She had looked me in the eye that night, smelling of expensive wine and deception, and told me about a fun time with the team. I wanted to print the receipt. I wanted to march upstairs, kick open the bedroom door, and throw the paper in her face. I wanted to scream until the windows rattled. I wanted to see the color drain from her face. But I stopped. My hand hovered over the print button, and I pulled it back. Negative, I thought. Stand down. If I confronted her now, with a single rideshare receipt, she would pivot. She would gaslight. She would say she dropped off documents. She would say the team met at his apartment before going out. She would accuse me of stalking her. She would turn the aggression back on me, labeling me as paranoid and controlling exactly the narrative she had seeded at dinner. A single data point is not intelligence. It is just noise. To destroy a target this entrenched, I needed a pattern. I needed a dossier so heavy that it would crush any attempt at denial. I needed financial records. I needed chat logs. I needed audio. I opened a new encrypted folder on my secure hard drive. I named it Project Dissolution. I took a screenshot of the rideshare receipt. I saved it as a PDF. I logged the date, the time, and the contradiction in my spreadsheet. Then, I opened a text document and typed out my rules of engagement. 1. Zero trust. Assume everything she says is a deception until verified by independent data. 2. No confrontation. Do not engage the target until the evidence package is lethal. 3. Emotional containment. Anger is a vulnerability. Despair is a distraction. Remain cold. 4. Preservation of assets. Protect the finances. Protect the reputation. Protect the future. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the silence of the house. Upstairs, my wife was sleeping soundly, confident that she was the smartest person in the room. She thought she was playing a game of secrets. She did not realize she had just triggered a counterinsurgency operation. I stood up, checked the locks on the office door, and walked upstairs to bed. I lay down next to her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. I did not touch her. I occupied my side of the mattress like a soldier occupying a trench. The war had begun, and the first casualty was my mercy. For the next 14 days, I lived in the gray zone. By day, I was the dutiful husband, making coffee, asking about her schedule, and playing the role of the unsuspecting partner. I became a mirror, reflecting exactly what Sarah wanted to see. A compliant, oblivious man who had accepted his lower status in the household hierarchy. But by night, when the house was silent and the rhythm of her breathing signaled deep sleep, I was an investigator building a federal case. My office became a sensitive, compartmented information facility. I bought a burner laptop, a machine completely air-gapped from our home network, and a separate 5G hotspot to prevent my traffic from appearing on the router logs. I was not just looking for proof of infidelity anymore. I was building a chain of custody. In a court of law or in a corporate boardroom, evidence without metadata is just hearsay. I needed the digital fingerprints that proved intent. The breakthrough came via a vulnerability most users overlook: the ecosystem synchronization. Sarah was diligent about locking her telephone, treating it like a nuclear football. However, she was careless with her company-issued tablet, often leaving it charging on the kitchen island. She assumed that because she had deleted the text messages on her phone, they were gone. She did not understand how cloud backups function. The data does not disappear, it simply migrates. I waited until she was in the shower one evening. I took the tablet, connected it to my forensic cloning tool, and pulled the entire backup image in less than 4 minutes. I did not need her passcode to read the cache files. I just needed the raw data. When I parsed the logs later that night, the picture that emerged was not just ugly, it was incriminating on a professional level. I found a hidden folder of photographs. They were explicit, the kind of images that scorched the retina, taken in hotel rooms that I recognized from her business trips to Chicago and Miami. But I did not dwell on the pornography. I looked at the background details. I zoomed in on the room service menus, the view from the windows, and the timestamps. Then, I cross-referenced these images with the recovered chat logs from an encrypted messaging application she thought was secure. The conversation thread was labeled Project Alpha. It was not a project. It was Ryan Hale. Reading their messages was like drinking broken glass, but I forced myself to process the text analytically. I stripped away the emotional betrayal and looked for the operational intelligence. "I cannot wait to see you in the boardroom tomorrow," Ryan wrote on September 12th. "I made sure the quarterly review is just us. I sent the rest of the team to the breakout session. We have the office for 2 hours. You are bad," Sarah replied. "What about the budget approval?" "I am the vice president of strategy, Sarah," Ryan answered. "I approve what I want. Besides, I put the dinner at Le Bernardin on the client development account. Just make sure you list it as vendor relations in your report." I froze. I reread the line. I put the dinner on the client development account. Summon the poisson drum. This was the twist I had not anticipated. I pulled up the organizational chart for her company, a mid-sized logistics firm with heavy government contracts. Ryan Hale was not just a coworker or a team lead. He was the senior vice president of operations. He was 3 tiers above her in the chain of command. This changed the battlefield entirely. This was no longer a domestic dispute about a cheating wife. This was a classic quid pro quo sexual harassment case wrapped in corporate embezzlement. Ryan was leveraging his position of power to facilitate a sexual relationship with a subordinate. He was using company funds, shareholder money, to pay for their affair. I opened the spreadsheet where I was tracking the Harrison project expenses. I began to overlay their chat logs with her expense reports. The correlation was perfect. October 4th. Chat log confirms they are at a luxury spa in Arizona. Expense report lists Regional Logistics Summit, Scottsdale. November 10th. Chat log discusses a gift, a diamond tennis bracelet. Expense report shows a client appreciation gift purchased from a vendor that, upon further investigation, did not exist. It was a shell invoice. Ryan was not just sleeping with my wife. He was grooming her into a criminal accomplice. He was teaching her how to defraud the company to service their lifestyle. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the darkness of the room. A cold realization washed over me. If I confronted Sarah now, she would cry. She would claim he pressured her. She would play the victim. If I confronted Ryan, he would deny it. And without the hard financial data, it would be my word against the word of a powerful executive. He would spin it as a jealous husband harassing a high-performing leader. But the numbers? The numbers were bulletproof. I looked at the dossier I was assembling. It was no longer a divorce file. It was a target package. In the military, a kill chain is the process used to identify and eliminate a threat. Find, fix, track, target, engage, assess. I had found the threat. I had fixed their location. I had tracked their movements. Now I had to determine the method of engagement. I realized that emotional revenge is messy. Screaming in a driveway or throwing clothes on the lawn is low-level, tactical thinking. It gives the enemy a chance to control the narrative. They can call the police. They can call you crazy. But corporate destruction? That is strategic. That is clean. If I exposed the affair, I was just a heartbroken man. But if I exposed the embezzlement, the policy violations, and the abuse of power, I became a whistleblower. I became a protected witness to a corporate crime. Ryan Hale had built his career on managing risk. As he had boasted at dinner, he had assumed I was a weak, passive man who would fade into the background. He did not realize that by mocking me, he had invited an auditor into his life who had unlimited access to his accomplice. I looked at the screen one last time before encrypting the drive. I had enough to ruin their marriage. But now, I had enough to ruin their lives. I closed the laptop. The silence in the room felt heavy, charged with potential energy. I was no longer hurting. I was calculating. The investigation phase was complete. It was time to move to containment. I needed to secure my own perimeter before I detonated the bomb. In modern warfare, you do not launch an offensive until your supply lines are secure. If you strike while your own perimeter is vulnerable, you risk a counterattack that could leave you destitute. For the next week, I operated in a state of cold, calculated silence. My wife Sarah believed we were living in the domestic status quo, but in reality, I had initiated a hostile extraction protocol. I began with the financials. Money is the oxygen of any conflict. Without it, the enemy suffocates. I treated our joint assets like a compromised server network, infected, unstable, and in need of immediate segmentation. I took a personal day from work, dressed in my usual suit, and drove to a bank across town where we had no prior history. I opened a new secure checking account and a high-yield savings account solely in my name. I did not move all the money at once that would trigger a fraud alert or give Sarah a notification on her mobile application. Instead, I executed a series of structured transfers, moving exactly 50% of our liquid assets, the legal limit of what I could claim as marital property, without being accused of dissipation. I routed my payroll direct deposit to the new account. I contacted the credit bureaus Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and froze my credit files. I placed a fraud alert on my Social Security number. If Sarah or Ryan tried to open a line of credit in my name to fund their exit strategy or cover their tracks, the system would lock them out instantly. The most painful part was not moving the money, it was updating the beneficiaries. I logged into my retirement accounts and my life insurance portal. For 7 years, Sarah's name had been the sole entry under primary beneficiary. I deleted it. In the blink of a cursor, she went from being the heir to my life's work to a stranger with no claim on my future. I designated my sister and a trust for my nieces as the new recipients. It felt like surgically removing a limb, a necessary amputation to save the body. With the financial firewall established, I moved to the legal phase. I did not hire a strip mall divorce lawyer. I retained a partner at a firm known for corporate litigation and high asset dissolution. His office was a fortress of glass and steel in the financial district. When I sat down in the leather chair across from him, I did not cry. I did not ask, why did she do this? I simply placed a 3-inch binder on his mahogany desk. This is not a standard consultation, I said, my voice devoid of tremor. I am not looking for a negotiation. I am looking for a surrender. The lawyer, a man who had seen decades of emotional wrecks, opened the binder. He scanned the first few pages. The timeline of the affair, the cross-referenced expense reports, the rideshare receipts, the recovered chat logs proving the embezzlement of company funds, and the organizational chart showing Ryan's direct reporting line over Sarah. He stopped at the section labeled Corporate Liability and Fraud. He looked up at me, his eyebrows raised. "This is admissible," he said, tapping the page. "And this is leverage. You have enough here to not only secure a favorable settlement, but to trigger a criminal investigation into her lover. What is your objective, Mr. Turner?" "I want a clean break," I answered. "I want my house. I want my assets, and I want them to know that I was the one who ended it." "We can do that," he said, closing the binder. "But you need to sit tight. Do not tip your hand until we file." "Understood," I said. I am holding the line. Leaving the law firm, I felt a strange, cold power. I had weaponized my pain, but the operation was not complete. I needed to ensure that when the hammer dropped, they could not scramble to hide the evidence. I returned home and implemented the final layer of my defense, the digital tripwires. I knew that the moment Sarah realized she was exposed, her instinct would be to delete everything. She would wipe her phone, scrub her emails, and try to destroy the digital trail. I was counting on it. I installed a passive monitoring script on our home network and placed a hidden canary file on the shared cloud drive. It was a folder labeled Tax Documents 2024. But inside, I buried a coded tracker. If anyone other than me accessed, moved, or attempted to delete those files, I would receive an immediate, silent alert on my burner phone. I also configured the router to log all outbound traffic from her devices. I was not stopping her from communicating with Ryan. I was letting her dig the hole deeper, recording every shovel of dirt she threw over her shoulder. The hardest part was the psychological camouflage. That evening, I came home and played the role of the oblivious fool to perfection. I cooked dinner. I asked Sarah about her day. I listened as she spun a complex lie about a stressful meeting with a client. I watched her fingers fly across her phone screen under the dinner table, texting Ryan while she nodded at my stories. "You seem different, Kevin," she said at one point, pausing with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Calmer." "I am just focusing on what matters," I said, pouring her a glass of wine. "I realized you were right at dinner the other night. I have been too uptight. I need to let things go." She smiled, a mix of relief and pity. She thought she had successfully managed me. She thought I was finally submitting to her reality, accepting my place as the supporting character in her exciting life. "I am glad you see it that way," she said, reaching out to pat my hand. Her touch felt like a burn, but I did not flinch. "Ryan thinks you just need to loosen up." "Ryan is a smart man," I said, maintaining eye contact. "He sees things clearly." She went back to her meal, satisfied. She had no idea that the man sitting across from her was no longer her husband. I was a sleeper agent in my own home. I was managing the chessboard, moving my pieces into kill positions while she was still admiring her pawns. I washed the dishes, dried my hands, and walked into the living room. Sarah was on the couch, laughing at something on the television, completely safe, completely secure, completely unaware that her financial assets were frozen, her legal exposure was maximum, and her secrets were backed up on a hard drive in a lawyer's safe. The containment phase was complete. The perimeter was locked. My assets were shielded. It was time to go on the offensive. It was time to pull the trigger on the trap I had so carefully laid. Tuesday morning arrived with the heavy gray stillness of a pending storm. On the surface, it was a standard business day. Sarah left the house at 7 a.m., wearing her power suit, a sharp navy blazer, and tailored trousers that she usually reserved for board meetings. She kissed me on the cheek, a hollow, reflexive gesture, and complained about the quarterly business review she and Ryan were presenting that afternoon. "It is going to be a bloodbath," she said, checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. Ryan is asking for a 20% budget increase for the logistics overhaul. The board is going to grill us. You will do fine, I said, handing her a travel mug of coffee. Ryan knows how to sell a story. She didn't catch the double meaning. She smiled, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door. I watched her drive away, knowing that she wasn't heading to a budget meeting. She was heading to an execution. I waited until 9 a.m., the precise moment the corporate servers at her company would be experiencing peak traffic, masking the injection of external data. I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over, ensuring I was nowhere near my home IP address. I booted up my burner laptop, connected to a secure VPN routed through a server in Switzerland, and opened the anonymous whistleblower portal for her company's parent corporation. In the military, we call this time on target. You do not fire the missile when the enemy is dug in. You fire when they are in the open, exposed, and confident. Ryan was scheduled to present to the audit committee at 10 a.m. I had timed the payload to arrive exactly 45 minutes prior. I attached the dossier. It was a single PDF, 90 pages long, titled Report Internal Financial Misconduct and Ethical Violations, Priority 1. It contained everything. Exhibit A, the chat logs proving the premeditated use of the client development fund for personal vacations. Exhibit B, the side-by-side comparison of Ryan's expense reports versus the geolocation data from the recovered photos. Exhibit C, the time-stamped proof of Sarah, a direct report falsifying vendor invoices to cover the cost of the jewelry Ryan had bought her. I did not write an emotional letter. I did not sound like a scorned husband. I used the cold, objective language of an auditor. Attached is evidence regarding the misappropriation of company assets by Senior VP Ryan Hale and Senior Manager Sarah Turner. These actions constitute a breach of fiduciary duty and potential wire fraud under corporate bylaws. Section 4.2. I hovered the cursor over the submit button. There was no shaking hand, no hesitation. This wasn't revenge, it was a correction. I clicked. Submission received. Reference case #height 820-B. I closed the laptop, destroyed the SIM card in the hotspot, and drove to my own office. Now, the only thing left to do was wait for the sensors to light up. By 10:15 a.m., the first tripwire triggered. My burner phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a silent notification from the canary file I had planted on Sarah's cloud drive, the folder labeled tax docs that actually contained the backup of her incriminating chats. Alert. Unauthorized access detected. Action. Deletion attempted. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen of my phone. A grim smile touched my lips. It had started. The compliance officer had likely walked into the boardroom just before Ryan started his slide deck. They would have pulled him aside, maybe whispered something about irregularities. Ryan, arrogant as he was, would have tried to bluff, but then they would have shown him a single page from my dossier. Panic is a powerful solvent. It dissolves discipline instantly. Ryan must have texted Sarah immediately. Burn everything. My phone buzzed again. And again. Alert. Batch deletion. Messaging archive. Alert. Device sync interrupted. They were scrambling. They were doing exactly what a guilty party does in the first 5 minutes of a crisis. They were trying to destroy the evidence. What they didn't realize was that in the corporate world, the act of deletion is often more damning than the data itself. It is called spoliation of evidence. By deleting those files while an internal investigation was active, they were upgrading their offense from policy violation to obstruction. I could see the digital ripples of their panic. They were running around a burning building, locking doors, not realizing I had already sent the blueprints to the fire department. At 11:30 a.m., Sarah called me. I let it ring twice before answering. I had to sound normal. I had to sound like the husband who knew nothing. "Hey, honey, how is the presentation going?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Kevin," she said. She was breathless. I could hear the background noise of a busy street. She was out of the building. I need you to do me a huge favor. I need the password to the home server. The one with the backup photos. The backup photos, I asked, feigning confusion. Why? I thought you were in the big meeting. There is a technical glitch with my work laptop. She lied, her voice cracking. I lost some files I need for the report. I think I saved a copy on the home drive. Just give me the admin password. She was trying to remotely wipe the local backups I had at the house. She was desperate. I am at work, Sarah, I said calmly. I do not have the password manager with me. Can't it wait until tonight? No, it can't wait, she snapped, then immediately dialed it back. I mean, it's really urgent, Kev. Please. Just think. I am sorry, I said. I can't help you right now. But hey, take a breath. It is just a presentation. Do not let the stress get to you. There was a silence on the line. A heavy, terrified silence. She realized she was locked out. She was trapped in the hallway, the walls closing in, and her safety line me was useless to her. Yeah, she whispered. Okay, I have to go. She hung up. I set the phone down. The operator inside me conducted a quick battle damage assessment. Target 1 Ryan. Likely suspended pending investigation. His presentation canceled. His reputation in freefall. Target 2 Sarah. Panicked. Compromised. Cut off from her digital support. Asset status. Secure. I leaned back in my chair and watched the city skyline through my office window. People were rushing below, living their chaotic, messy lives. Up here, in the silence of my strategy, everything was orderly. The trap had snapped shut. They were currently thrashing against the steel teeth of the audit, bleeding out their careers and their credibility. And the best part? They still didn't know I was the hunter. They thought they were just unlucky. I checked the time. 12 p.m. I opened my calendar and set a reminder for 6 p.m. Meeting title. The end. I would go home tonight. I would have the dossier on the kitchen table, and I would finally introduce them to the man they had created. I selected the venue for its absolute lack of sentimentality. A small, glass-walled conference room in a business hotel downtown. It was neutral ground. No wedding photos on the wall, no memories of shared breakfasts, no home field advantage for anyone. It was a sterile vacuum, perfect for decommissioning a failed partnership. I arrived 15 minutes early. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, my hands clasped in front of me, breathing in the conditioned air. In front of me lay a single manila folder. I didn't check my watch when the door opened at 6 p.m. precisely. Sarah walked in first. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup hastily reapplied evidence of the panic attack she'd likely suffered in the office bathroom hours earlier. Ryan followed her. He looked different than he had at the restaurant. The expensive suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, the confident sprawl replaced by a tight, coiled tension. He looked like a man who had spent 6 hours fighting a fire he couldn't see. They sat on the opposite side of the table. The distance between us was only 4 feet, but psychologically, I was observing them from a satellite orbit. Kevin, this is insane. Sarah started immediately, her voice pitching up into that familiar, breathless register she used when she wanted to reframe reality. You didn't have to drag us here. We could have talked at home. You're overreacting to rumors. Gaslighting. The standard countermeasure. She was attempting to question my perception of reality, trying to pull me back into the emotional mud where she could maneuver. There are no rumors, Sarah, I said. My voice was low, flat, and devoid of frequency variation. There is only data. Ryan leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the table. He tried to summon the executive presence that usually silenced subordinates. Look, buddy, I don't know what you think you have, but you need to be very careful. Defamation is a serious tort. If you try to damage my professional reputation with some jealous husband act, I will bury you in litigation so deep you won't see sunlight for a decade. Intimidation. The secondary defense protocol. I didn't blink. I didn't raise my pulse. I looked at Ryan with the mild curiosity of a technician examining a broken circuit board. Your professional reputation, I asked. I believe that asset has already been liquidated, Ryan. I slid the folder across the table. It moved with a soft hiss against the polished wood. Ryan opened it. I watched his eyes scan the first page. It was a printout of the automated confirmation from his company's internal audit department. Receipt of whistleblower complaint #height 820B. Beneath it were the exhibits. The time-stamped chat logs regarding the Harrison project funding, the cross-referenced geolocation data, and the forensic accounting of the embezzlement. The color drained from his face. It wasn't a slow fade. It was an immediate crash. He realized instantly that this wasn't a divorce negotiation. It was an indictment. You, Ryan whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and terror. You sent this to the board. I routed it through the anonymous compliance portal at 9 a.m. I replied calmly. By now, the general counsel has already frozen your internal access. Your company phone is likely bricked. Security is probably clearing your desk as we speak. Sarah grabbed the papers from him. Her hands shook violently. She read the chats, her own words, her own jokes about stealing company money, her own mockery of me printed in black and white, stamped with metadata verification. Kevin, she choked out. She looked up at me, and for the first time, the mask of the superior wife crumbled. I saw the fear. Kevin, please. This ruins everything. My job, my vestment schedule. They'll prosecute us. That is a probable outcome. I agreed. Fraud over $10,000 is a felony. I believe the total calculated misappropriation was $42,000. Why? She screamed, the sound echoing off the glass walls. Why would you do this? We could have just divorced. Why burn it all down? I didn't burn it down, Sarah, I said, standing up. I just conducted the audit. You two built the faulty structure. Gravity did the rest. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a second document, the divorce papers, already signed by me. I placed them on the table next to the evidence of their crimes. The house is listed for sale as of this morning, I stated, shifting into pure operational briefing mode. My legal counsel has petitioned for an immediate freeze on marital assets to prevent dissipation due to your criminal liability. I have moved my share of the liquid funds to a secured account. You have been removed as the beneficiary on my insurance and retirement plans. Sarah stared at me. She looked at the man she had called boring and safe at dinner just weeks ago. She finally saw the truth. I wasn't safe. I was precise. And she had mistaken my silence for weakness instead of target acquisition. Ryan didn't speak. He was slumped in his chair, staring at the table, calculating the ruin of his career. He knew there was no recovery from this. In the corporate world, you can survive incompetence, but you cannot survive financial theft. He was finished. I am leaving now, I said. Kevin, wait. Sarah scrambled up, reaching across the table. Where are you going? We need to fix this. I can explain. Do not contact me. I interrupted, my voice cutting through her panic like a scalpel. My lawyer will handle all communications regarding the dissolution of the marriage. If you attempt to approach me at my workplace or my temporary residence, I will file for a restraining order and add the harassment evidence to the existing dossier. I turned my back on them. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back for one last glimpse of her tear-stained face. I didn't offer a parting insult to Ryan. To engage further would be inefficient. The operation was successful. The objectives were met. I walked out of the conference room, down the long, carpeted hallway, and into the lobby. I stepped out into the cool evening air of the city. There was no rush of adrenaline. There was no cinematic swell of music. There was just silence. It was the silence of a system that had been purged of malware. It was the quiet hum of a rebooted life. I loosened my tie, took a deep breath, and hailed a cab. I was alone. My bank account was half empty, and my marriage was dead. But as I watched the city lights blur past the window, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had walked through the fire, and I hadn't just survived. I had won. In the end, Kevin's victory wasn't just about the tactical destruction of his enemies. It was about the preservation of his own soul. He proved that true strength isn't found in screaming matches or violent outbursts, but in the quiet, unshakable knowledge of your own value. By refusing to engage in their chaos, he didn't just win the argument, he reclaimed his future. Remember, when someone tries to make you feel small, you don't have to shrink to fit their narrative. You have the right to protect your peace, secure your life, and walk away with your head held high. Sometimes the best revenge is simply moving on and living a life they can no longer touch. If Kevin's story of cold justice and self-respect resonated with you, please subscribe to Secret Lovers and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. We love hearing from our community around the world. Please comment below and tell us which province or state you are watching from today. Do you think Kevin was right to ruin their careers? Or should he have just walked away? Let us know your opinion in the comments, and be sure to click the video on your screen right now for another incredible story of betrayal and redemption.